So this is the third and the final part of a three-part series that we've been having on the channel this week, listing the top 30 heavyweights currently active in the division. If you haven't already checked out parts 1 and 2, I recommend you do that before continuing with the rest of the video. Part 1 went up on the channel Monday the 6th of November. This is 2017, if you're watching this years in the future. Part 2 went up Tuesday the 7th of November, and today is Thursday the 9th of November 2017. So we've had the top 20. They are listed in the, we've had numbers 30 to numbers 11 listed in the first two parts. In this video, obviously, we're going to be focusing on numbers 10 to number 1. So we're talking the cream of the cream. We're talking the elite of the heavyweight division. Now, I'm going to start by saying I didn't struggle to work out the 10 fighters that I wanted in the top 10. I did struggle with the order of numbers 7 to 10. You know, I thought the guys at numbers 7 to 10, much of a muchness. Let me just say, I couldn't argue with you if you had my number 10 ahead of my number 9, or my number 8 ahead of my number 7, and vice versa. You know, I think those guys are much of a muchness. I actually think it's slightly easier to put the guys at the very, very top of the division in order. So anyway, without further ado, at number 10, Bryant Jennings, an underrated fighter and a fighter who I still think has a lot to offer in the heavyweight division. Decent wins. He's beaten Arthur Szpilka, beat Szpilka by knockout, possibly took care of Szpilka a bit more convincingly than Deontay Wilder did. Mike Perez, and I believe I'm right in saying he took Mike Perez's I'm not 100% sure I've got that right, but from memory, he took Mike Perez's O when Perez was a very, very hot up-and-comer at the time. Beating Andrei Fedosov as well. Bryant Jennings, that level of form still puts him there or thereabouts. He did suffer back-to-back defeats, which stops him from being much higher on the list than 10. The defeats coming at the very highest level to Vladimir Klitschko, who was the number 1 at the time of the defeat, and Luis King Kong Ortiz. But Bryant Jennings has come back subsequently. Don't get me wrong, he's come back at a lower level. He's got another fight in the diary, which I believe is at a lower level, and the rumours are that he will be taking on Joseph Parker in the not too distant future. So watch out for Bryant Jennings. He's a man who's still going to be doing something in the heavyweight division, and I think the pick of his form gets him in the peripheries of the top 10. Number 9, an unbeaten fighter, Jarrell Big Baby Miller. Now, Jarrell Miller's got a fight actually the weekend that we're about to come to against Mariusz Wach. For those who are interested, I've done an extended breakdown of that fight. It went up on the channel earlier today, so earlier on Thursday. That's already gone up. And Mariusz Wach, Jarrell Miller is certainly a very, very big favourite to beat Mariusz Wach. If he beats Mariusz Wach, it would even more firmly cement his place in the top 10 for my liking. Obviously, if he were to lose to Mariusz Wach, he would take a substantial drop and go out of the top 10, but it's not anticipated that he will lose that fight. His previous best win against Gerald Washington, I thought he handled Gerald Washington very, very well, especially considering he came into that fight, very, very overweight. And also Fred Cassie. So good highlights of Jarrell Miller's form, convincing knockout wins over the likes of Cassie and Gerald Washington. And for me, the peak of his form gets him into the lower end of the top 10. So I've got Jarrell Miller at number 9. Now, I'm hoping numbers 10 and numbers 9 aren't too controversial. Number 8 could possibly get me a bit of stick. I've gone for Dillian the Body Snatcher Whyte at number 8. And the reason for that, I know people don't like Dillian Whyte. They don't like the way he fights. They don't like his performance against Robert Helenius. There's some controversy over the decision in the Derek Chisora fight. I get all of that. But if you want a more extended breakdown of how I choose to rank fighters and what I prioritise, please watch the first 5 minutes of part 1 of this series, where I sort of talk through it in a bit more detail. But in a nutshell, this is a list based on achievements and resume, and I actually think Dillian Whyte's wins over Helenius and Chisora are fairly strong from a form perspective. I do. Chisora, he's not an elite fighter, he's not a top 10 fighter, nor is Robert Helenius. But they're both guys who only tend to lose when they get into that European level competition. And Whyte's beat them. And to be fair, I know Robert Helenius didn't turn up to the fight in best shape, but Whyte beat him convincingly, despite the fact it was an uninspiring performance. Whyte won that fight very, very widely. So I've gone for Dillian Whyte in at number 8. Clearly a big loss on his resume, Anthony Joshua. But Anthony Joshua, I won't be giving too many surprises to say he features even higher up on this list later on. So, the only loss has come at the very, very highest level of the game. And, Dillian Whyte, he maybe isn't the fighter you'd pick out if you were saying who is the number 1 head-to-head. But in terms of resume and in terms of those 2 noteworthy victories, I felt he merited a place at number 8. I feel Helenius and Chisora are stronger wins than Gerald Washington and Fred Cassie that Jarrell Miller had. And I kind of feel that Helenius and Chisora were stronger than the best picks of Jennings' form, whether that's Spilker and Fedosov, etc. But as I say, it's much of a muchness, and if you wanted to change the order 1 or 2 places there, I couldn't strongly disagree with you. It's very, very tight at this sort of level, and on balance, this is the way I thought was fairest. At number 7, now I said 10 and 9 I don't think were too controversial. 8 is probably controversial. I think 7 is equally controversial because it's Lucas Browne. Now, Lucas Browne is a guy who really his resume comes down to one piece of form, which is the Ruslan Chagayev fight. But I've always tried to be consistent on this channel, and I've always said, in my opinion, one piece of form is enough if it's strong form. For example, I had Tyson Fury number 1 after his win over Vladimir Klitschko. I have Agit Kabayel I think I put him in at number 15 on this list, even though he's only had 1 win over Derek Chisora. And I've got Lucas Browne at number 7 over his win over Ruslan Chagayev. People who are new to the heavyweight division maybe are not aware of Ruslan Chagayev and how capable he was on his day. In many ways he was an underperformer, but a very, very capable fighter. And Lucas Browne went to his backyard and knocked him out and put in a career high performance. Now that fight caught a lot of headlines after the bell because of performance enhancing drug scandals. I appreciate that is a separate issue, and I will acknowledge that it's a major issue. But the fact of the matter is, Lucas Browne is a active fighter. He's cleared to fight, and his resume states a KO win over Ruslan Chagayev. So as a result of that, I've included Lucas Browne on this list. If you want to exclude people who've had performance-enhancing drug controversies because of political reasons, you're entitled to do that. But for me, I wanted to take any opinion, any sort of, any sort of things like that out of the equation and just focus in terms of pure form. And based on that, I have to have Lucas Browne towards the top of the heavyweight division. There are other bits and pieces of form on his resume other than Ruslan Chagayev. There's the KO win over Richards Towers. There's the win over Andrei Rudenko. I'm not saying he's done nothing other than Ruslan Chagayev, but clearly that is the standout piece of form. And without that, he'd probably be ranked late teens, early 20s. So Lucas Browne, an interesting name to have on the list. Number 6. Hopefully we're going back into calmer waters here. Hopefully this is not one that's going to get a huge amount of uproar. Kubrat Pulev. Good wins. Tony Thompson, Derek Chisora, Dimitrenko, Alexander Ustinov, Kevin Kingpin Johnson. Good wins from Kubrat Pulev. Obviously a loss at the highest level to Vladimir Klitschko. Pulev lacks an elite name in terms of his resume, but what he has got is some sort of consistency in the way he deals with that top 20, top 25 level of opposition. You know, he's beaten multiple people within that category and he's beaten them convincingly. So I think Kubrat Pulev is a solid addition to this list, and one that can't really be overly disputed given his consistency. Number 5, Luis Ortiz. I'm going to echo the sentiments that I stated with Lucas Browne. I've read mixed reports as to whether Luis Ortiz is banned. You know, I've heard 6 months ban, I've heard a 1-year ban, I've heard that you know, he may be cleared to fight Deontay Wilder as early as the spring. I don't know when the ban starts. I don't know if the ban starts from the date of his last fight. You know, stuff like this is so unclear, and you know, it's so inconsistent in world boxing how the rules are applied, that I wanted to include Luis Ortiz in this fight because in this list, because you know, I don't know when the guy's next going to fight again. I don't know if he's going to be permanently out of the game, etc. Obviously, there's performance enhancing drug controversies there. It's a discussion for another video. But on form, on resume, whether that resume is tainted or otherwise, some decent names. He's beaten Bryant Jennings by knockout. He knocked out Jennings when Klitschko couldn't. As you guys will know, Jennings was in the top 10 of this list. Knocked out Malik Scott. Sorry, didn't knock out Malik Scott. Went to points with Malik Scott. As you know, if you watch parts 1 and 2, Malik Scott did make the list in the lower half of the drill. Another win, knockout win over Tony Thompson. You know, strong resume from Luis Ortiz. Clearly, he's got his issues outside of the ring, but he is, you know, one of the only guys so far who I can say has beaten one of the existing top 10 in Bryant Jennings, and he did it in some style. So, as a result, Luis Ortiz relatively high up in the list at number 5. So we got 4 fighters left. Number 4 for me, Joseph Parker. Joseph Parker, quite a hard guy to analyse really in terms of where to put him. I almost had him at number 5. I almost had him behind Ortiz. I thought on balance he deserved to be number 4. He doesn't have an elite level win like Ortiz has, you know, from a resume perspective. Ortiz has a win over a top 10 in Bryant Jennings. Parker's wins come against somewhat unproven fighters, you know. However, I wanted to rank him at number 4 because I think the fact that he's taken on those unbeaten fighters and the fact that he's beaten guys who clearly have huge talent and huge potential in the sport does merit inclusion. His best win for me is actually still the fight against Carlos Takam. Carlos Takam narrowly missing out on my top 10, but Parker beat him in a close decision, but in a decision that Parker did deserve for my money. So I thought Parker's best win was Takam. Hughie Fury, Andy Ruiz, Alexander Dimitrenko, these are all guys who's made the top 30, and Joseph Parker has gone and beaten all of them. The Hughie Fury fight was a controversial fight. Hughie, I think I had him in the late 20s in terms of my rankings. But what I would say is, regardless of that, Hughie's clearly a guy with an immense amount of talent who can potentially operate at the elite level of the sport. I know there's Andy Ruiz people who think Andy Ruiz is an immense talent who can operate at the elite level of the sport. So it may be that in 2 or 3 years' time, if Andy Ruiz goes on to win a world title, if Hughie Fury goes on to win a world title, if Carlos Takam runs world champions close like he did with Anthony Joshua, it may be that with time, Joe Parker's resume continues to get stronger. But at present, I don't have him beating one of the existing top 10. And I have his best win as Carlos Takam and his second and third best wins against a slightly untested Hughie Fury and Ruiz. So on the basis we're doing it on resume, I struggle to have Parker too much higher than 4th. Although I would acknowledge it's relatively close. So Joseph Parker for me slots in at number 4. 1 place behind the Bronze Bomber, Deontay Wilder. Now, Deontay Wilder, best win for me. Bermane Stiverne #1. Bermane Stiverne #1 was a notable win. Bermane Stiverne was a WBC champion. He was coming off 2 relatively recent wins against Chris Arreola. He was a much fresher fighter than Bermane Stiverne in Bermane Stiverne #2. So for me, the Bermane Stiverne #1 fight is Deontay Wilder's best win. And whilst most of us would now question Stiverne, looking back on him after the performance in the second fight, we've got to be honest and say that if we all drew up our heavyweight top 10 list prior to that matchup with Deontay Wilder, the vast majority of us would have had Bermane Stiverne as a solid top 10 contender. So, Deontay Wilder's best win is that fight. He's got other noteworthy wins. Johann Duhaupas is a good name. Gerald Washington is a good name. Malik Scott is a good name. Arthur Spilka is a good name. Chris Arreola is a alright name. But what I'm getting at with Wilder is whilst Wilder and Parker lack that elite level name on the resume, what they have, particularly Wilder, is a consistency against people in and around the world top 20. So I've ranked Malik Scott, Gerald Washington, Johann Duhaupas, and Arthur Spilka in this list, and Bermane Stiverne in this list. Wilder's gone through that set of guys, 5 or 6 guys there I've mentioned. He's gone through them. He's gone through them in devastating fashion. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you Deontay Wilder's got like a world-class resume. You guys know he hasn't. You guys know there's some question marks over it. But he has shown a level of consistency against a number of top 20 contenders for my book. And as such, I've got him in at #3. #2. I don't think you'd be absolutely mental to have this person as #1. In fact, apart from the person I've listed as #1, I think #2 is the only person you could make a tangible argument is #1 if you're judging this list on the same criteria that I am. #2 is Alexander Povetkin. Povetkin has the deepest resume in the heavyweight boxing division. Johann Duhaupas, knocked out. Mariusz Wach, stopped. Carlos Takam, knocked out. Manuel Charr, knocked out. Marco Huck, Mike Perez, knocked out. Andrei Rudenko, Ruslan Chagayev, Eddie Chambers, Chris Bird. The list of names Povetkin has been in with is actually really impressive if you look down on his CV. Making some controversial comments. If you actually compare Alexander Povetkin's best wins, they actually stack up quite nicely for me, even against a guy like Vitaly Klitschko. Alexander Povetkin has some real good wins. And he's beaten guys who were solid level guys, at the time he fought them. Certainly Ruslan Chagayev, certainly Eddie Chambers, Carlos Takam you'd throw into the mix. He probably does lack an elite name. But then so many of these fighters in the heavyweight division do. Wilder doesn't have a truly elite name. Parker doesn't have a truly elite name. Ortiz, he's got like a Bryant Jennings name. Povetkin's got that sort of level of name. He doesn't have a Klitschko or a Joshua or a Wilder or a Parker or an Ortiz. There's a lack of the elite guys in the division fighting each other. In fact, I think I'm right in saying that none of my top 7 in this list have been in the ring with each other, and that kind of tells you something you need to know about heavyweight boxing. It actually tends to be till you get down to #8, Dillian Whyte, and #10, Bryant Jennings, that you see guys who've taken on other guys in the top 10. But realistically, Povetkin, whilst he doesn't have an elite name in terms of the Hall of Fame elite, what he does have is an incredible depth of top quality, world-class heavyweight contenders. And I think he still deserves to be at the very, very top of the division. Look, another guy with performance-enhancing drugs controversies, but we've discussed that with Luis Ortiz, we've discussed that for Lucas Browne, so I'm not going to make the same comments that I did for both of those guys for Povetkin. Alexander Povetkin has a bad loss on his resume, a loss to Vladimir Klitschko. It was a really, really bad loss in the sense that Povetkin looked out of ideas. He pretty much lost every round. He was badly hurt in the fight, dropped several times, and showed that he came up very, very short at that top level. And being frank, that is the reason that I had him at 2. Because my number 1, I don't think you need to be Brain of Britain to work out who my number 1 is. My number 1 fought that same individual, Vladimir Klitschko. And unlike Alexander Povetkin, he came through that fight and he came through it in good fashion. No surprises for guessing who my number 1 is Anthony Joshua. And Joshua's win over Vladimir Klitschko is, for me, by far the most important single piece of form in heavyweight boxing if you're looking to rank fighters. It's a win against an all-time great heavyweight, potentially an all-time top 10 great heavyweight. It's a win against the first ballot future Hall of Famer. It's a win against a champion with an untold amount of defences, and it's a win in very, very good fashion. And for me, the nature of that win on its own, catapults Joshua to the elite and means Joshua is the number 1 in my list. Deontay Wilder, Joseph Parker, Alexander Povetkin, Luis Ortiz, Kubrat Pulev, Lucas Browne, all great, great fighters. And none of them have a win like Joshua has over Klitschko. And until they get to that position, I'm not going to rank them above Anthony Joshua. Joshua does have other pieces of his form. He's got Carlos Takam. We've talked about Carlos Takam when we discussed Povetkin and when we discussed Parker. So he's got Carlos Takam. He's got Dominic Breazeale, who's a definite top 20 fighter. He's got Dillian Whyte, who made the lowest section of my top 10. So it's by no stretch saying Joshua's only form is against Vladimir Klitschko, but what I would say is it's the reason that Joshua is a clear number 1 for me. I think Povetkin obviously has more experience and as such has a greater depth of resume than Joshua. But Joshua, when Povetkin fought the elite, he came up short. When Joshua fought the very same elite, albeit an older version, he won. And I think that's why I choose Joshua as number 1. So that's the list, guys. I'm going to recap my top 10 for you. Number 10, Bryant Jennings. Number 9, Jarrell Miller. Number 8, Dillian Whyte. Number 7, Lucas Browne. Number 6, Kubrat Pulev. Number 5, Luis Ortiz. Number 4, Joseph Parker. Number 3, Deontay Wilder. Number 2, Povetkin. Number 1, Anthony Joshua. You can never please anyone with these lists. People rate fighters on very, very different metrics and different factors, etc. And the heavyweight division, some of these heavyweights have a religious type following. Joseph Parker fans, they've almost got like a cult-like following. Deontay Wilder, a lot of their guys, a lot of his fans think he's, the second coming of George Foreman and Mike Tyson. Obviously, AJ's got his mega fans as well. So you can never please anyone with these lists. But this, for me, is a fair representation of the top 30 based on what they've done in the ring and based on tangible achievements. I have looked at all of the governing bodies' top 15 lists. And if I'm honest, maybe it's arrogance, I would say that my list more accurately reflects the realities of the top 15 in the heavyweight division than any of the sanctioning bodies out there. Just my opinion. It's a very, very, very exciting time for heavyweight boxing. Let's hope that some of those guys in the top 7 fight each other. I've heard lots of rumours about Browne versus Joseph Parker. Lots of rumours about Deontay Wilder versus Joshua, or maybe Luis Ortiz. Povetkin's going to be back in the mix soon. Luis Ortiz will be back in the mix before you know it. Let's hope some of these top 7 guys fight each other. And then next time when we sit down to do a list of this nature, we can make it even more clear, because number 2 has beaten number 3 and number 5 has beaten number 6. You know, that would make life a hell of a lot easier and add some huge clarity and glamour to the division. Let's hope Tyson Fury comes back. People don't like Tyson Fury, people love Tyson Fury. He's a divisive character. But whether you love him or hate him, you have to acknowledge he adds something to the heavyweight division. He adds hype, he adds personality, he adds build-up. And, you know, that sort of excitement can be added. Lots of good prospects. You know, we've talked about some of the Joseph Parker victims. Hughie Fury, Andy Ruiz, these are guys who can comfortably make waves into the top 10. Comfortably. They just need to get the right fights and beat the right opponents. Jarrell Miller, active only this weekend. You know, let's see what he's got to offer. Can he be a guy right at the top of the heavyweight division? And then you've got the next waves coming through. Perhaps in 6-9 months, whenever we next sit down to formulate a list like this, perhaps Daniel Dubois will be making waves. Perhaps Joe Joyce will be making waves. Perhaps these guys will be fighting at the sort of level where they can make their way back to the division. Perhaps David Price will come back with a knockout win, you know. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? Perhaps Deontay Wilder will do a trilogy against Bermane Stiverne, you know. We will see. Lots of unanswered questions. It's a great division. I enjoy talking about it. I want to thank everyone who supported this 3-part series from when the first video went up. It's done alright in terms of views. It's done well in terms of interactions with people clicking the thumbs up, with people leaving comments. We've got some new subscribers off the back of it, so thanks to everyone for that. If you want to get more involved, add me as a friend on Facebook using the link in the description box below. Hit me up on Twitter at Boxing Gossip. As always, if you haven't done so before, do subscribe, do leave a comment, do hit the thumbs up button, and the only thing left for me to say is thanks for watching. I really do appreciate you guys choosing to spend your time, 26 minutes and counting in this instance, watching my channel. Thanks guys.